Hello, and welcome to USA Today's The Excerpt. I'm Dana Taylor. Picture this, a powerful synthetic opioid that quietly morphs into one of the nation's most lethal drug crises, a drug that can be slipped undetected into heroin, counterfeit pills, the nation's bloodstream. You've seen and may have even been touched by the devastating impact of fentanyl, and now a different class of ultrapotent synthetic opioids called nitazenes are following an eerily familiar path. Just how dangerous are these drugs and where are they coming from? Here to unpack those questions and more is Dr. Greg McDonald, the chair of the Department of Forensic Medicine and Pathology at the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine. Thanks for joining me on the excerpt, Dr. McDonald.
Thanks for having me.
First, these aren't new synthetics. What's the origin story of nitazenes, and have they ever been approved for human use?
They go back to 1950s when they were developed. I believe it was in Switzerland in a laboratory. But because of the marked potency and the strength of these drugs, they were never approved for medical uses. I don't believe in any country that I'm aware of.
I mentioned that these are ultra-potent synthetic opioids. Are nitazenes even more potent than fentanyl? Can you compare the two for us?
Yes, they are more potent than fentanyl. Now, remember, the nitazenes, they're a group of opioids. So they're different, what we call analogs. They're slightly different chemically. And some of them are much, much more potent than fentanyl. Some maybe 2 or 3 times more potent than fentanyl. But they all pose a significant danger because of that great potency. And also, people who may be getting these drugs on the street, they're not aware of what analog they're getting or the potency of it. And that's why it can be so dangerous.
How difficult has it been to track the use of nitazenes? Have regulators simply overlooked these drugs?
They don't necessarily overlook them, but laboratories, and we have some of the finest forensic toxicology laboratories in the world in the United States, but it's a challenge for them to keep up with the changing chemical structure of these substances. So the illicit laboratories, they change a small portion of the chemical structure, and now that no longer is illicit or illegal. And then the law enforcement, as well as the toxicology labs who are studying it, they need to be able to recognize that. So I think many of the analogs are being analyzed routinely as a matter of course in most toxicology labs. But as the chemists, the illicit chemists begin to change things, both law enforcement and the toxicology community has to play catch up.
And is that why nitazenes are difficult to detect in toxicology tests?
They can be, yes, unless you know what you're looking for, unless you know the specific type or analog that you're testing for, it can be a bit of a challenge. Luckily, we're getting better at doing that, but it still can be pretty difficult at times.
This is a U.S. problem, but it's also, of course, a global issue. How have nitazenes infiltrated the international drug market? Who's manufacturing these drugs, and how are they making their way here?
Well, there are a variety of different places where they can be made. Again, you just have to need access to a laboratory. So many different countries are producing it, and they can be transported for, just as any other illicit substance may. So I really don't know where most of them are being produced right now. Sometimes it's hard for even law enforcement to get a grasp on that.
I want to turn now to some of the reasons why nitazenes have reemerged as street drugs. What's driving the demand for substances more potent and, as you said, more dangerous than fentanyl?
Well, I think that people are seeing they're getting used to fentanyl, the potency of fentanyl. And if you're trying to sell illicit substance, you want your product to be even more potent. Unfortunately, that has lethal and dire consequences for the people who are ingesting it. So I think that there is potentially a marketing issue there that where they want to get a more potent product out, but obviously that comes with severe side effects.
I want to touch on addiction based on what you've seen. Who's most at risk here?
Anyone, anyone is at risk. Anyone from any walk of life, any person that live in the city, suburbs, rural areas, anyone is potentially affected by this. And because of its significant potency, it has a very addictive nature. So anyone who thinks that they're getting another type of opiate, maybe heroin or fentanyl, they may be getting this mixed in with those other drugs, which is oftentimes the case. And then obviously they can get addicted.
Dr. McDonald, in terms of treatment, can naloxone or any other medication effectively counter the effects of these drugs?
Yes, since the nitazenes are an opioid, they can be affected by Narcan, naloxone, but because of their significant potency of them, it may require several doses of Narcan to be able to reverse the adverse effects of this. And that's something that first responders are starting to understand nowadays, that you give one dose, person may not come around, so you may have to give several other doses of Narcan to reverse the effects because it's just so potent.
We failed to act quickly enough with fentanyl. What's urgently needed at this moment from a policy perspective?
Well, that's a good question. Might be a little bit above my pay grade. Obviously, it's going to be a challenge for law enforcement to locate where these laboratories are, to shut them down if we can. If they're outside this country, which many of them are, we need to have an idea as to how they're getting into the country. And, that goes from a federal perspective all the way down to local municipal law enforcement. And people in my community, in the forensic community, we need to provide as much data to law enforcement, public health professionals, so that they can have some important data so that they can guide their policies.
I mentioned the path we watched play out with fentanyl. You've tracked the illicit use of nitazines. Are you seeing a parallel here?
So it's similar, yes. We started to see this group of drugs, illicit drugs, in the like around 2018, 2019, they were starting to pop up. Obviously, there was some other scattered cases earlier than that, but that's when it started to hit most places in the United States, right around there. And then it has, astronomically, just exponentially increased in the last few years, which is follows a similar trajectory as some other illicit substances like fentanyl and the fentanyl analogs as well.
Are there any other drugs that are on the street right now that are as frightening as this drug?
There are several that are frightening in their own ways. Xylazine is certainly frightening, and it's not an opiate, but it is a sedative, and that can have a lot of other effects on other parts of the body. So that is something that we're concerned about. Again, they're all dangerous. They all have their own side effects and their own potencies and dangers to people. And that's what makes a bit of a challenge for everyone to try to get all of these off the street.
And finally, netizens feel like the canary in a coal mine. We're once again facing a reckoning in the quote, war on drugs. What clear message would you like our listeners to take away from our conversation?
Again, any type of illicit drug, you don't know what you're getting. Okay. It is not made by legitimate pharmaceutical companies. You're going to have a drug that is mixed with a bunch of other types of drugs that you may not be familiar with, each of which has different potencies. And that's why we're seeing so many deaths associated with these, because people just don't know the effect that that's going to have on their individual bodies. And unfortunately, the outcome, as I see quite frequently, is a tragic one.
And we did want to add, if you are struggling with an opioid addiction, there is help. Call the 988 Lifeline. Thank you so much for being on The Excerpt, Dr. McDonald.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for watching. I'm Dana Taylor. I'll see you next time.